You're listening to Disrobing the Mosh Pit, a dissection of music and popular culture, with your hosts, Pete and Tom.
Hey, how's it going? Welcome to episode 10 of the podcast.
Hi.
Tom here, and we have Pete over there.
Guys, how you going?
And it's a bit of a special one because this being our 10th episode, we decided to mark it with getting in a very special guest for the first time, talk about what we like talking about, that is music. And we're lucky enough to get someone with a career that involves music. And we would like to welcome, and are very happy to welcome, Adam Green from The Hits. How's it going, Adam?
Kia ora. Hello, guys. Thank you very much for having me. Special episode. It's special for me too. Although I'm kind of involved in music and a lot of talking, I haven't really done a podcast before. So first time.
Oh, look at that.
First time, lads.
Cherry.
Yeah.
It's not like you haven't had enough practice. Jeez. You put us to shame,
Totally
probably.
intimidating.
No, it's good. It's good. It's exciting to be on the kind of the other side of the microphone, I suppose. Well, the same side, but, be on the interviewee position rather than doing the interviewing.
Awesome.
Yeah.
One thing that we like to, I guess, start with often is just talking about something that we've been listening to recently a little bit. And maybe like an album, maybe a song, something like that.
It's a pretty loaded question since you work in radio.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we do listen to a lot of music.
We do. I guess lately my daughters have just got a streaming service and got the premium version. So they've kind of been showing me a lot of music, or at least taking over the car, and the Bluetooth has been connecting up and it's been playing their music. So whatever they're listening to, I'm kind of listening to. So a lot of Dua Lipa at the moment.
Oh, nice.
There are some Dua Lipa that I've been quite enjoying, I must say.
There's nothing wrong with that.
No.
She's epic, I reckon, eh? She's real good. She does like, I heard that she wrote some ridiculous number of singles before she went through like a sorting process. So she wrote something like 80 songs, and then from there we got the, however many it is, 12 from her latest album. That's part of her process. A huge number of quite like finished, from start to finish, the final product. Singles to choose from.
Yeah, I guess in radio you do get opportunities to talk to a few people who produce music, and that oftentimes does seem to be the process these days, where you get somebody. Even we had 660 through before their last concert tour, and they were very similar ilk. They had a heck of a lot of songs put together. I think they sort of tried to write at least a song a day, and they just pumped out this music, sometimes 2 or 3, and then they go to their producer, and their producer has a listen, and they have a listen together, and then they cut it down, and they get their final edit. And it does seem to be a process that a lot of artists are following these days, just a huge amount of music and hoping that something sticks, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think from what I've heard from her album, people keep playing me little bits here and there, and it sounds epic. Real good.
Yeah. It's unfortunate that the girls have taken over the Bluetooth and the stereo, and I don't get to play my stuff, but it's just, I guess, a part of life with having kids and them growing older. And it's interesting watching them develop their own musical tastes as well. Although they do listen to clearly a lot of the radio station and the music that's coming off the radio, now that they've got these streaming services and they're able to tuck themselves away in their bedroom and they can start to use them, and the services kind of go, you like that? Here, how about this? Try this, try that. And watching them kind of develop their own sense of musical identity is really interesting, I guess, because when I was a kid, I really latched on to one particular style of music. My dad he was a musician, so, he had a lot of muso friends, and they'd come around and he had a wide range of records, but for some reason I really identified myself as this rock and roll kid. And I'm not talking like cool rock and roll, like, Tom Petty or the Led Zepp or any of the rad rock and roll bands. I just latched on to like Jerry Lee Lewis, and that was my jam. Fats Domino, all of that sort of thing. And so for a long time as a kid, I just really saw myself as the rock and roll kid, and even I think so much as stopped myself from liking other music. So if I go back to when I was very first making little radio cassette tapes, I had a Ghetto Blaster. I don't know if you guys did that, but I wasn't thinking I wanted to be on the radio at that stage, but I was making little radio cassette tapes, and I remember this one that I made up that was like, I'd introed, say, Jerry Lee Lewis, and then we'd gone into another rock and roll song. And then I remember voice break, as we call them when we're talking on the radio. Didn't know that at that stage. One, I was like, and here's a song that other radio stations might play that I don't actually like, but other radio stations might like it. And I threw a Bon Jovi song in there. And I remember talking about it like I didn't want anyone who was listening to the tape to know that I might have liked Bon Jovi because I was the rock and roll kid, you know? So it was for the longest time. And it wasn't until I was kind of even, I don't know, maybe 10 or 11 before I started branching out and actually not being the rock and roll kid, maybe even 12, 13. It was funny. So it's interesting watching my kids kind of pull their own musical. That's thankfully cooler than being the rock and roll kid, you know. I don't think it went down that well at school, to be honest.
There's nothing wrong with being the rock and roll kid.
I actually think it's pretty cool when kids actually show a sense of ownership when it comes to music. You know, we sort of talked about that a little bit a little bit before, when I, as a parent, feel pretty good when my kids are like, "Dad, listen to this," and they're kind of quite proud to show me something that they've been into, because I guess it's like a projection of them and kind of how they're feeling, and if they feel comfortable enough to sort of get it out there, then that's a pretty cool thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
I get what you're saying. Yeah.
How old are your kids, Adam?
So I've got a 6-year-old, a 10-year-old, and a 12-year-old coming up. She's a teenager in sort of January next year.
Good spread there.
Yeah.
And obviously with a good spread of musical tastes as well.
Yeah, definitely, you know, and I suppose the little ones, they kind of follow what you're doing, although there's other things that tend to really shape a kid's musical interest these days as well, you know. For us, when I was a kid, radio did shape a lot of what I listened to. You'd listen to the Hot 9 at 9 or, you know, whatever it was. And I think it still is a thing that people do. FM radio's hung in there, but there's a lot of other options out there. And the likes of something like TikTok can make or break an artist. You can get your song on there. It can launch you into the stratosphere, and it can also put you in front of so many other kids, you know, who are really the ones that are consuming the music on digitally these days.
It's
that way.
Disarmingly honest, that sort of thing. TikTok and Snapchat and Instagram and that sort of thing.
Well, I kind of feel like, yeah, you're totally right, and I feel like it's connecting like in the most sort of, I mean, it's got its materialistic aspect, which is kind of grotty, you know what I mean? Like that's kind of
the
fake.
Influencer thing.
Yeah.
It's quite topical.
Yeah, but at the same time, it's got we've talked about how music appeals to people and how kids, I think, have this connection with music where it's not about inhibitions at all. So if something moves them, they're just like, boom, they start dancing.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what that's directed at, right? The TikTok thing is it's got to make kids just boom, boom, boom.
And it's got to catch them fast, you know? Like everything is so fast paced. That's what I've found on those apps is the videos are kind of 10, 15 seconds, and it's got to grab them within that first 10 to 15 seconds or it's gone. So I don't know whether people are kind of making their music to appeal to that. But then I suppose you look at something like Fleetwood Mac. They had their song with the cranberry juice guy on his skateboard.
Oh yeah, that's true.
And that all of a sudden we were playing Fleetwood Mac on the hits again, the original version, you know. We weren't playing remixes or anything else. We were playing the original version of this Fleetwood Mac song, and it rocketed up the charts, and it was back on there. So you know, they didn't write music for TikTok. They just wrote their music, but it seemed to be something that really, really worked in that kind of moment and for that video. So yeah, it's interesting to see the way. And I wonder if other older artists are kind of like, man, give me some of that TikTok action. Like, I could have handled being back on the radio again and getting a little bit more time to shine, I guess.
That's when you need someone that's really good with technology, because, you know, like myself, I've demonstrated how like completely inept I am at working some things. I was trying to post an emoji on Facebook. Like my wife said, no, you've got to post it as a reaction. I was like, oh yeah, cool. So I posted it as a comment. She's like, oh, you're so terrible at this. You're showing your age. You know? No, a reaction. So, do I need to school you? I was like, yeah, maybe. Like I need to throw that in there a little bit.
What did I see recently? Elton John's just done a collaboration with, who did he work with?
Dua Lipa and P Now is the one. He's got one of those. In fact, I think he's got a whole album coming out, but the collab / remix, I guess it was, because it wasn't new music.
Yeah,
it was an old Elton John jam.
Yeah.
It's rocketed him to number 1 in the UK again. So I think that he's got number 1 hits across 6 decades now.
6 decades.
It's a long time,
The
right?
Beatles didn't have that, right? I don't know, like some sort of record, right?
It is definitely a record, absolutely, and it's massive, you know. And I guess that's the advantage for him, is that for everyone who's youthful listening to that song, and we're playing it on the hits, that's new music to them, whereas we kind of have a sense of nostalgia in it, but also the remix spices it up a little and makes it kind of a little more playable for current breakfast radio. So
yeah, it's got to be real interesting seeing if a younger listener who is into that kind of style of music is kind of, their curiosity is piqued and they kind of think, I'm going to go back and listen to Elton John's earlier stuff. And I wonder if they're into it like the same way that, I wonder if it still has this relevance that it had
surely
back then.
That would happen with some younger listeners, surely.
Totally.
Right?
Well, you remember the joy of discovering an artist that you thought no one had heard of before. I was in high school and listened to the Frampton Comes Alive, Peter Frampton album, the guitarist, and he makes his guitar talk, man.
I feel like I do.
Exactly. Do you feel like I do? And I remember discovering that and feeling like I was the only kid in high school that had ever heard of Peter Frampton, and how cool it was, that I'd found this artist from way back that no one else was listening to. I don't know whether there might be an element of that where they kind of go back and go, you know what, Dan, this Elton John guy, he's got heaps of albums. There's tons of them.
Good song's a good song, eh?
It is.
And I guess like there's just so many examples of them showing the test of time, isn't there?
Well, doesn't that show like how much longevity an artist like that has?
Totally. A good hook is just like an earworm. It gets in there and everyone's into it.
And I think, as you say, a good song's a good song. When you're in the radio industry, there are definitely songs that burn on you, Like
we were wondering about that actually, weren't we? We were just sort of thinking like it'd be a good question for you whether or not there are times where you're kind of like, oh, and we're about to play.
Well, I really don't want to have to play, but I'm going to have to. Like it's part of the list.
Yeah,
I'm looking at you, bad liar. I'm a bad liar. We play that a lot, and there are definitely times where songs, they can grate on you a little bit, and I guess you don't have to be super enthusiastic about them, but you never want to be saying, and here's the song I hate the most. It's Bad Liar on the hits.
You'd have to be quite impartial, wouldn't you? But when you're introduced, and even if you absolutely hate it, you'd still have to be relatively neutral when it comes to presenting it. Wouldn't you
do, and I think where we're a bit lucky is that we've been in the market. Our show's been in the market for quite a long time now, and the audience, they get to know you. You definitely are, just yourself on the show, and I think that's what people like. And so they do get to know you, and they do get to know what you like and what you don't like. And I think we're at a stage where the audience trusts us enough that we can get away with that to a degree, to a little bit, like, oh, here's this one again, and have a bit of a joke about it. And sometimes it's songs that Megan, my co-host, she might actually really love the song, and then we can get a bit of banter going on about that, and I can get it off my chest that I really don't want to play Bad Liar, but we kind of got to, so out it goes. But when you say a good song's a good song, there's those pop songs that come up time and time again that just kind of stand the test of time. Like I personally, Slice of Heaven, Dave Dobbin, I could hear that song, and I don't know whether there's a bit of Kiwiness element to it as well, where you had that kind of, you do feel when you're a kid learning about New Zealand musicians, you kind of feel a little bit more passionate about them, being that we're a small nation, and particularly at that time when it was more difficult to get out and about and get a song that was a hit, you're like, oh, this guy actually really made it on the international stage. So maybe there's an element of that in it, but I just think it's a great song, and I could play it once a morning and probably not get sick of it. And even some modern pop songs turn up that you're like, Matchbox 20, I can handle those guys playing on any given day, but there are definitely songs that show up sometimes that you just go, ooh, this one. Here we go again.
I guess like being involved with the radio, you also see the other side of music that, again, we've talked about a bit, which is the commercial music, the jingles and that kind of stuff.
Yep.
Do you sort of tend to zone out when there's jingles going on?
Yeah, definitely. And even a lot of the music, if I'm perfectly honest, because with the show that we do, we talk before and after every ad break and before and after every song. So any kind of like preparational work that you're doing is done while there's either an ad break playing or there's a song playing. So you're kind of doing your off-air work and your discussion and what are we going to do here, and where are we going, is all done while the music's on. So I guess by the very nature of the job, you kind of do start to learn to just zone out and really, like if you're in any job and you've got the radio on in the background, it's playing music. I guess if you're working in farmers at Christmas time, and the Christmas album's playing day in, day out, you got to form a way of just blocking that out.
Yeah.
You're probably sick to death of Buble by the end of Christmas.
Oh my God, yeah.
So it's kind of the
totally.
same thing. You do get to a point, but vice versa. If there's a song that hasn't played for quite a long time, and you've got that, and all of a sudden it appears, and you're like, wow, oh, this one, and up goes the volume, and we have a bit of a dance and a sing song in the studio, and you've got great speakers in there, so you can pump it up quite loud. So there are moments where a song really kind of sticks out, and you go, oh yes, I can't believe this one's playing. It's great.
What do you think makes actually? What would make you stop and listen to a jingle in particular? What do you think? Is there any jingles in particular that you're kind of like, damn, I got to stop and listen to this one?
I don't know if there's any that really make me go, oh, this jingle's a jam.
I wouldn't be surprised if there were none.
There's not many that make me go, this jingle this is the one, man. I'm on the vibe to this.
I'm on to the Cheesecake Shop.
Yeah, Cheesecake Shop.
Who wrote this?
Got me humming.
Because what did Justin Timberlake wrote one for Apple, right? And then it became a number one.
I only think of him in McDonald's.
Was it?
I'm driving it.
Yeah.
That's Justin Timberlake.
Was that him?
Yeah,
Okay,
that's him.
yeah. Again, like that's my research. not being on point.
Don't say anything, Tom.
But I think the thing with jingles is you've got to give credit to some of those jingle writers for writing something that can be so, I guess at face value, incredibly annoying, but also really stick in your head and, 800, 83, 83, 83.
Yes.
Such a simple little ditty. And it lives rent-free in my head forever. And I think it might still be the phone number, to be perfectly honest. So I think if I wanted to...
I'm not saying that I've dialed it recently, but I'm fairly certain it
Let's
is.
do it tonight. Let's get pizza after this.
If I want to call for a pizza, that pops up and there it is, and that's the beauty of a jingle. And I guess that's why they work, because the good ones, they stick around for a very, very long time, and once they're ingrained and they're in there, they're not going anywhere.
They become institutionalized, they become part of the culture, like the Briscoes lady, and it's it's part of the culture, New Zealand culture,
definitely.
The
Even her
warehouse.
tone of voices, really, eh?
I've heard that she wears a wig.
Oh, really?
I heard that too.
Yeah,
I think that might be true.
yeah, because she looks pretty timeless. She hasn't really changed
she
since
does
the 80s.
too.
We're like 40 years on.
Yeah.
You're like, wow, okay. You've really kept your hair colour.
I don't know if they've even upgraded the music that much.
I don't know they have.
Yeah, that sounds surely the same
Yeah.
as it did in the 90s, eh?
And again, what a beautiful little jingle. There it is, just bang, top of mind, you can pull them up so very, very quickly, the truly good ones.
And whoever wrote that would still be getting royalties too, eh? It's like, oof.
That's a good track, yeah.
Yeah, we're not real, as I sort of alluded to, really tight with our research methods going into different episodes. However, before you came on this evening, I guess like each of us individually were doing a little bit of a background kind of, just looking for some interesting talking points on you specifically. And one thing that was kind of interesting is it's music related, but also it's kind of more related to being someone who's in the public space a little bit with you and your line of work. Is that like I've seen you post some stuff on social media where you're sort of quite opinionated, which is good. I always agree with it. I think it's always great things to say. Does that ever, I suppose, because the Hits is quite a popular radio station, eh? It's not like, it's kind of...
It's right down the middle, eh?
Yeah, pretty mainstream, eh?
Yep. Yeah, definitely.
Do you ever feel like that's a bit stifling with regards to being opinionated on social platforms and stuff like that? It doesn't seem like you have let that stop you.
It's interesting you bring that up now, because there was something reasonably recently that was kind of probably... It got a bit heated in the comments section, and I ended up taking it off my page for that very reason. So I guess I do. I can get my opinion across, and again, that's where we're lucky that the show knows a lot about who we are. They know about who I am as a person and how I raise my kids, and a lot of my opinions about the world. So we're quite lucky in that people listen in spite of that. vice versa, you wouldn't go on to the radio show and start slamming political opinion down anyone's throats, because that's not what we're there for. We're there for lighthearted entertainment. And the same thing when it comes to my social media, I probably do to a degree. Filter it. Maybe my wife filters it a little bit more. If I post something, she's like, "Dude, you can't post that."
Yes,
and take it down, which is good. I'm glad she's a voice of reason there. But there is always a filter in my mind.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because we both played the podcast episodes for our better halves before we air them. And they're always like, "Oh no, you got to take that out."
Incredibly good critics. It's perfect, because they don't hold back with the criticism, but it's good. You need it, because there's so many things that you don't realise you've said in the heat of the moment, or it sounds a certain way, and you have it formed in your own head, and then when you hear it afterwards and they've pointed it out, it shouldn't be like that.
Yeah.
It should potentially come out.
And I guess on the other side of that, both musically and even in your own personal opinions, you do get to learn a lot in radio that no one's opinion is necessarily the right one either, So again, though, I put a filter on things, whether we're doing it on air or whether I'm putting it on my social media, that just because I don't like Bad Liar, a lot of people bloody love it. A lot of people really enjoy that song, and probably still to this very day enjoy that song playing. And it's the same thing with opinions or, anything else. So just because I don't like something one way, some people might really like it. And if I was to go on air or on social media and go, "Hey, I hate this," you're probably going to get a bit of pushback from people. So you do learn, I guess, in the industry to be a little bit more open-minded and go, "All right, well, I think things are this way, but there's definitely people out there that think things are that way, and what's right? Am I necessarily right? Maybe I'm not." So
just sort of being diplomatic and impartial and stuff. I guess you must be getting pretty good at that.
Definitely. And it does get more and more difficult as time goes on, and as you get older and you probably get a little bit more steadfast in your own opinions, it does get perhaps a little bit more difficult to kind of stifle that to a degree. But for the most part, on the show, because we're reasonably lighthearted entertainment, I can just be who I am and who I want to be, which is awesome.
Yeah, I've noticed that in the last sort of 15 years or so, is that in the Good Morning shows, people have, because you had in New Zealand, there was like Paul Henry and stuff, right?
Yeah.
Being pretty outspoken about all kinds of things. But then you see them in Britain and stuff like that, and they've got the same kind of setup with usually a couple of morning presenters, and they just don't hold back at all with those kinds of opinions and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It seems to be kind of the norm with I guess some of the what would normally be quite lighthearted shows.
Yeah.
The breakfast shows. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but in New Zealand, I guess Paul Henry started this thing, right? Well, maybe not started it, but it seemed like he didn't really suffer any mad repercussions.
Yeah. And there was times where he said things that personally I think were probably pretty inappropriate, and I think a lot of New Zealand did. There was a couple of things where he got kind of wrapped over the knuckles for, but he did get away with it. And I guess when you're in that sort of radio, polarizing people is the done thing, because people, they're either going to listen because they love you and they agree with you, or they're going to listen because they hate you and they want to hate you. But people love being outraged as well, you know? So there's something in that. There's something in, I'm going to listen to this guy tomorrow because he made me angry. And I'm going to get angry again, which is where we try to very much steer away from. I don't want to make anyone angry.
Maybe we can get some more listeners like that.
We're just getting really opinionated about something.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, throw it out there, no holds barred, and see what happens.
Have you had any things like that? People like, pretty much, I guess, being really, what's the word, confronting after something you've said on air?
We've been really fortunate that the hits audience here and the hits audience in most of the areas in New Zealand that I've worked with have been really forgiving, I guess, and really I haven't got into a lot of trouble, and I haven't had a lot of really angry feedback, and we haven't even had a lot of sort of trolling on our social media. We've been really fortunate that I think the types of people that I guess are going to listen to the show and really want to engage with the social media, at least on a regular basis, are all just there to have some good music and have a few laughs and have some fun. And even when you do something that might be considered, I don't know, by some a little bit fringy, or I guess even something like getting the vaccination. We got our vaccinations on air for COVID, and I really expected some flack for that, or at least some kind of negative comments and things to come through, but there was none of that. So
it's quite a polarizing issue at the moment, isn't it?
It is. It is definitely, and we decided that it was a personal thing. I prefaced it by saying, this is my personal choice to do it. I'm not telling anyone what to do, but this is what I wanted to do, and these are the reasons why, basically. And I think perhaps that is the reason we didn't get so much, maybe flack for it, I guess.
Yeah, I get the feeling that you're not a particularly kind of, how can I say this? I get the feeling that a listener wouldn't want to go after you because of your manner. You sort of seem
not Mike Hosking.
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, you don't seem to be like to trigger. Even if you might have strong opinions, I don't think they would necessarily trigger people. People wouldn't be like, "Oh, should I got to teach this guy a lesson?"
Yeah, I've been lucky. I think the biggest trouble what I got into was I was talking about the I Have a Dream special. I have a dream.
Yeah.
That one day, which is a very serious and, it's a very kind of an important part in history and all the rest of it. And I was talking about that particular day when that speech was off. And I said, what about if he was like talking, instead of coming up on stage and talking about the dreams that he had that were realistic dreams, what if he jumped on stage and talked about his actual dreams, the dream that he had last night? Like, I had a dream that one day I was riding a horse and I was naked and I was going down the street and people were looking from all sides, and went in like that. And there was somebody that considered that was kind of really, really, I hope I haven't offended anyone again, but considered that was really offensive because I was taking quite a serious thing and making light of it, I guess. But we do that all the time. So you
guys are live all the time.
Yeah, we are live all the time. Yeah. So we turn the microphones on, and what we say is what comes out, and it goes out to the people. We've kind of, I guess, over the years, you develop a filter like you do when you first start swearing, and you swear amongst your friends and don't swear in front of your parents. You kind of got this inherent built-in filter. Yeah. But that was one thing that somebody did complain about.
Okay.
The complaint wasn't upheld, or there wasn't anything that came of it. And I called the person in the end and said, "Hey, look, I'm sorry I offended you with that. I didn't mean to," kind of thing. But I just thought at the time I thought it was funny. It was kind of funny.
I do that all the time. Yeah. I think things are funny, and
wait a minute. Oh, that's awkward.
I'm often proven wrong. Again, that's where my better half steps in.
So, Adam, did you go to broadcasting school? Did you fall into radio as a career that you kind of wanted to get into just by chance? Or?
Yeah. So I had. I'd made big changes in my life, both musically. I was no longer the rock and roll guy. I'd kind of moved on and drove a Cortina and was listening to Pantera and was where,
Straight to Tom's heart.
Yeah. So I'd very much changed my my musical opinion. I still, on the sly, had a cheeky rock and roll kind of listen every once in a while, but I was listening to Pantera, and I was kind of changed very much as a person. And I was working in bars, and I was working at this mountain boarding park, which is like off-road skateboards. A guy tried to set it up in Taupo, and he had this kind of like grassy hill and then a couple of dirt tracks, and they were great fun. They were amazing. I got into the kind of the grassroots level and started and worked my way up to the point where I could do these dirt tracks and do jumps and things. But the problem with them as a tourist attraction was that when you fall off on the dirt, like you're going to hurt yourself, right? Snow is quite forgiving. If you're on a snowboard and you fall over all day, you're going to be okay. If you're on a skateboard on the dirt
Shingle.
And you fall over, you're hurting yourself. It wasn't really, it wasn't exactly humming. It was a great idea, and he was a lovely guy, but it wasn't humming. And I thought, I've got to do something else, I could see maybe the writings on the wall for this place. And there was an ad for the broadcasting school in Tauranga, and the Taupo Times, and I was working in Taupo at the time, and I read this ad and I thought, I used to make these little radio cassettes as a kid, and the Taupo radio announcers at the time were reasonably famous in Taupo, they seemed like they lived this really cool life. They turned up to the cool events and they were on the stage, and and so even as kind of like, I guess I was 19, 20 years old, I sort of saw them as quite cool. And I saw this ad and thought I'll go and I'll give that a nudge. And it was a 6-month course over in Tauranga. And so applied, and you had to go over and voice an ad, and it was horrible. You know, they
really
must have
hard
let
doing
just
that,
about anyone in, because my first read was terrible. I think it was an ad for some jeans or something, and you know, like it sounded like I was reading it. Come into the store and get these cool jeans. It will be amazing when you get them. They are great. And they were like, yep, cool, come on in. I guess they just, you know, they could see here's another student that's going to grab a student loan and hook us up some coin.
Yeah, that's true.
But it was an interesting course, and I really enjoyed it. They had a little live radio station that they ran. It's different owners and a different course now to the one that I did, but they still do radio school in Tauranga. But I did 6 months there, and I just thought, yeah, by the end of it, this is what I want to do. I really had a heck of a lot of fun. They give you an opportunity to do different shifts on the station, and I really enjoyed breakfast as well. It was just like we were talking more, and there was more fun things that you could do. And so I moved out of that broadcasting school thinking I'm definitely going to be a broadcaster. I'm going to be on the radio. And it's way harder than you would think to actually get on the radio once you've completed broadcasting school. Then, you know, it's not just like you walk out of school and get a job. And at the time, a lot of opportunity in radio was shutting down as well, because the smaller towns that used to have local DJs to do everything were now starting to network out to the biggest centres. You know, you've got Auckland that can just do a show, and that can be broadcast through all these different regions who used to have a guy who did the breakfast show and the day show and then the drive show, or a guy or a girl or a couple or whatever it was. All those jobs were starting to dry up. And so I thought I'll move to Auckland and I'll just try up there. Let's just shoot for the stars. And I ended up working in a bar again, because it was tough, man. Like, it was a hard industry to break into. And I got really, really, really lucky in that I saw an ad for one of the promotional, the car drivers for My FM Street Team. They call it the My FM Street Team. And I applied, and I went to this interview, and pretty much at the time my radio idol was kind of like Robert Rakete. He'd been on RTR Countdown, and I'd been in Auckland a few times, and I heard him on this My FM show, and I just thought he was just so cool, you know. And Stacey Daniels at the time, or Stacey Morrison, she is now. She also works for the Hits now. She was on the show as well. And so I walk into this interview, and those guys are there, and I'm like, oh, I was from Turangi. These guys were celebrities to me, you know. Like, oh, man, those people have been on the TV. Oh, man. And so I went through the interview, and I talked about my broadcasting school and everything else, and I went away, and I thought, I think I did pretty good in that interview. And they rang me a few days later and said, hey, you we're not going to hire you for the street team job. And I thought, oh, man, back to the drawing board. I'm stuck in the bar. And they said, but would you like to do midnight till 6 a.m. live, which is what they called a mid-dawn shift.
Okay.
And the stations had done them in the past, but by that time there wasn't many live mid-dawn shifts going on. There was maybe talkback. Okay. No local radio stations would have been doing them, you know, no small town ones. And so I did the midnight till 6 a.m. shift live for, I don't know, maybe 9 months. And then Stacey moved on to another radio station. There was another hip hop station that started up. And when she moved on, they rang me up and said, hey, would you like to move on to the breakfast show? So I'd all of a sudden gone from, you know, working in a bar and having no radio job to within 9 months being on a breakfast show in Auckland Metro City, which is a job that some people had kind of clambered their whole careers to get to. So it was a massive leapfrog moment for me. And not only that, I was working with Robert Rakete, who was my hero, but also very cool broadcaster, and Nick Brown, who was another guy who's really had a long and very cool broadcasting career in New Zealand and had a lot of things to teach me. So I was surrounded by these guys who just had so much knowledge and so much passion for radio as well. They were just everyone was just stoked to be there and doing it. So yeah, it was just a really, really massive opportunity for me to be there and jump straight into that. And it's held me in good stead ever since. There's been ups and downs, but it was a good start.
Pretty amazing trajectory though, eh?
Wow.
It was a massive jump. But yeah, even then, I mean, I never got into radio to be a famous guy or, you know, for fame or fortune. Certainly not Fortune, because it was not an industry that is famous for its massive amounts of money that it pays.
Yeah.
I mean, there's money to be made at the sort of the upper ends, I guess. But I just wanted to do it because it was really cool. And I was also, with the My FM job, I was going through a massive hip hop phase. I was listening to Snoop Dogg and Jurassic 5 and Nas, and I was finding all of these hip hop artists. So I was genuinely passionate about the music too. And I guess that's one advantage of being maybe open to a lot of different musical genres and not really, I'm glad I didn't stick with just rock and roll, I guess, because that's going to be, there's not a lot of stations where I'd be talking about just rock and roll, but I had pretty broad musical interests. Yeah. And so that enabled me to kind of go onto My FM, and then I went to the Edge.
Put you in good stead.
To various different stations where there was various different music, and now on the hits we're pretty mainstream kind of pop, but I do like a lot of the music we play. There's a lot of the stuff that we're playing at the moment that I genuinely enjoy.
Yeah, man. Yeah, that's what do you think? Just what do you think about the future of radio? Is that a conversation that you guys ever have that much? I guess with the advent of streaming and everything like that, and.
Yeah, it's there's been multiple conversations across the years because I've been in radio 20 years now, so I saw iPods show up for the first time, and when iPods showed up and MP3 players in general, but it was iPods to start with, everyone's like, oh, there's no way, no one's going to be listening to radio once they can put their music on their iPod and plug it into their stereo, man, like no one's going to want to listen to that. Well, people kept listening, and people got iPods, no doubt about it, and people used iPods, and they became a phenomenon. And Apple was huge, but so too was still FM radio, and AM to a degree, but FM radio was still chugging along quite nicely. And then the podcasting thing started, which we're doing right now, and people said, oh, podcasts are going to they're going to be massive. People are going to take over. They're going to take over the radio industry. And now that people are able to have a lot of data on their phones, I mean, initially that was the thing. People said, oh, look, people can't have them on their phones. They're not going to be streaming with their data plan or whatever. But it's getting more and more so that eventually I'd say we're going to have unlimited data on our phones, or even the ability to tune into it on our screen on our car or whatever. But I think the one thing that's kind of held radio in good stead, and it's still holding on very strong, even in markets who are far more advanced than us with satellite radio and things, paid subscription radio basically through sort of the US, and FM radio still just hung in there because it's super immediate. It's you're talking about something, if there's a car crash on the motorway and it's causing traffic and it's going to stop people from getting there and someone sends us a text, we can talk about that a minute later. That this is still happening. People are either sitting in it and identifying with it, or you're informing people that this is going on here. Or if Mount Ruapehu erupts that morning, then all of a sudden you're talking about it and you can be there with people and you're kind of experiencing collectively what's going on at the exact same time as everyone else is. So I guess that's kind of where radio's saving grace as opposed to other mediums is that you're there with people living their lives at the same time as they are, morning by morning by morning or afternoon or wherever you happen to be. But you're kind of there, you're doing it with them, and you're talking about the things that are happening right now. Yeah,
and you know what I kind of quite like about putting the radio on in the car is that I guess we curate our own playlists and Spotify and all that kind of stuff. So there's an element of unpredictability and kind of randomness with the radio, and even on national radio or news talk or those kinds of things, you never really know what's sort of coming up. Yeah, and there's the new stuff, and I quite like that. It takes a bit of that control out of your hands. Takes a bit of the. It's a bit of
I reckon a bit of an age thing as well. Like you sort of maybe sort of mid-teens, maybe early 20s. You listen to a lot of the radio. Sort of a bit of a hiatus through late 20s into your early 30s, and then you start coming back into it again.
Yeah.
I find
our generation anyway.
Yeah. I'm certainly finding with myself, I listen to the radio a lot more now than I ever did, really.
Yeah, me too, actually. A lot
it gets put on in the kitchen. You're doing some cooking or something like that, and the radio goes on in the corner.
And if you're a regular listener, you genuinely you can become friends as an announcer. You can become friends with some of the regular listeners because they pop up in terms of text and things. But even if you're not somebody who's interacting with the radio show, because you're listening to someone talk about their lives day in, day out, day in, day out, you know, you get that with a friend or a co-worker or anything else. You do start to feel a kind of a personal relationship with those people. And you do start to feel like their friend, and you're kind of keen to see what they were doing the next day or whatever. Like even myself, I'm not immune to it. Yeah, I listen to afternoon radio and I'm like, oh, they were talking about that thing. And you're perhaps maybe a little bit more judgmental of the way they're doing it when you are on the radio, but you still get caught up in it. You still want to go, oh yeah, they were talking about that thing yesterday. I wonder what happened with that, or that announcer was getting married, or whatever the case may be. You kind of think, oh, what's going on with my mates? I guess is what you hope that people are getting the feeling of anyway. And I think that people who are regular and are really involved with the show, they do get a bit of that. Yeah. But I like what you said about the unpredictability, because we, even as announcers, we get the chance to have that sometimes. You know, we had an all 90s morning the other day, which, you know, with the type of radio we do, there is a lot of repeating. The songs, they come up again and again. And we did this all 90s day, and it was just song after song that was nostalgic bangers. And I had such an enjoyable morning.
Yeah, that's cool.
All these songs coming up that I was like, oh, that one. Oh, yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome, you know. So, again, I think I was probably experiencing that along with a lot of the listeners. And if there's some genuine enthusiasm about what you're talking about, and there's genuine from the heart enthusiasm there, then I think people can feel that.
Totally. You know, like, is the term syndicated for the music? So it's kind of curated. And
yes.
Do you ever get to choose what music is played?
Yep. So, again, you probably wouldn't if you were a brand new broadcaster.
Yeah.
You have to stick with what's there.
Yeah.
And I remember the first song I ever announced on my FM. It was "What's Golden" by Jurassic 5.
Oh, awesome!
Yeah, it was a great song to start with. I'm like, yeah. So that was an awesome start. But we are lucky that because we've been in the industry so long, we're given an element of trust, I guess, from the programmers, that we're not going to play something that's so far out the gate.
Yeah.
It's so far out of the realms. We couldn't throw Rage Against the Machine, Killing in the Name Of, in the middle of the show, despite the fact I love a bit of Rage Against the Machine, because probably 80% of the audience are just going to be like, what the heck? There may be one or two rockers sitting there like, yeah!
We'll wake them up. We'll definitely wake them up.
Yeah. but for the most part, probably people are going to go, ugh. But we, you know, if we're talking about a particular artist or it's someone's birthday or whatever, we do have an element of trust there that we're going to be able to go, this is appropriate for the audience that we have, and we can play it, you know. And sometimes you push those boundaries ever so slightly. Like there's been days where we've thrown a bit of AC/DC in the mix or whatever, just for a bit of fun. But I think also that just the shock value of that is actually pretty fun for everybody as well. Yeah. And so long as it's nothing too heavy duty, you can get away with it. So yeah, we're given a bit of artistic license to play around with it to a degree.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Have you had a really embarrassing moment or like an embarrassing prank caller? Is that a thing? Do people still like prank call?
We don't really get prank callers to us. You used to be able to do prank calls outwardly, but then there was a few things that went down overseas that really kind of like, I guess there's a lot more scope for embarrassment for the company these days to do outward bound ones. Have I had any embarrassing moments? I've definitely sworn on air before. I don't know if anyone in the management level of the station knows, but back when the New Zealand Music Awards were on, they held on a Thursday, and I guess they might do that. They're still on now, but back when I was going to them when I was in Auckland, they hold them on a Thursday, and maybe they think that that'll stop people in the industry from going, you know, maybe consuming too much and going too hard. But we had a reasonably large night out, and back in those days, we had this thing called Master Control, which was like a CD that would crank up. If you weren't there to start the radio station, you'd get this CD that would crank up that would, because on the computer, the logs would stop. The music would stop playing at 6 o'clock, and you had to manually push a button to start the radio station for the morning. If you weren't there, you'd have a few minutes or probably, 10 seconds of silence, and then this thing would crank up. This is Master Control, and it would start playing some music, and it was the same CD over and over. And for some reason on that particular morning, it hadn't kicked in. And I woke up at about 6:20 and I rang my co-host and went, dude, like, why didn't you call me? Like, I'm not at work. Why haven't you rung me? And he goes, why didn't you call me? Like, are you not at work? And he's like, man, no, I'm not at work either. So we both hop in our cars and it's dead air, and it's been dead air for like 20 minutes, which is a very, very, very long time in the radio industry.
Yeah.
You know, you're not, but anything more than about a second is really quite the no-no.
Okay.
And we got to work and we carried on with the show. And, you know, we got it done. I lived quite close, so it wasn't a hell of a long time after that before I got to work and we got the show going. And I sort of said to him, like, dude, do we fess up to this, or do we just kind of write it out? And he goes, just write it out and see what happens. And for 3 weeks afterwards, every time the big boss would be like, Adam, can I see? I'm just like, this is it. I'm done. We're getting fired. We're out of here. But, you know, we got away with it. But I lived with a huge amount of shame every time the boss called me in due to that particular one, for sure.
20 minutes of silence in every single breakfast show for the next 3 weeks just to really sort of, no, that's part of the show.
It's normal, man. The audience likes to sleep in, okay? We don't want to interrupt them until the wake-up time.
You know, and really, you know.
Yeah. So, you know,
awesome.
there's occasional moments where you are left floundering a little bit, I guess, but yeah, we're far enough into it now that for the most part, if the microphone's on and you're talking, you can come up with something reasonably decent to say at the very least, and not do anything too silly. Yeah.
And you're a musician as well, eh?
Yeah.
So you know, you play guitar and sing.
Yep.
So we know that. And do you get the chance to write music? Do you how often do you play, or like do you do any composition?
I do. Yeah. So
cool.
I've written original music. I guess it's something that's actually really, really advantageous to the radio industry as well.
Yeah.
We do a thing called Rap the Week, where every week I take kind of the topics that's gone and write like a little hip hop ditty that's about a minute and a half. But even with that, you know, like parody songs are something that has stood the test of time. If it's a good one, people are very quick to jump on. If it's a cheesy one and you don't put a lot of effort into it, it's kind of a bit cringeworthy. But you know, if you do something that's on topic and is genuinely, well, at least I hope, funny, then people still like it. They like a parody song, and so that's where that comes in quite handy. I can jump on a guitar and I can whip something up and we can do a bit of a song. So it's convenient knowing how to play an instrument, and I'm kind of glad that my father passed that on to me.
Yeah, that's probably quite an interesting point of difference, hey? The fact that you are, you know, you can play and sing as well.
Is that very common, do you think, like within the industry? Many musicians? Like Robbie Rakata, I think he can sing.
Yeah. Robbie can sing, and maybe that's where I've picked up a lot of the parody thing from, because they did used to do a lot of that. You probably don't see it as much now, and I don't know whether there's a lot of musicians in the industry. Again, I guess it is a bit of an advantage to be able to just whip up a song, or at least know, you know, even some of those things that come inherently with music. Knowing how to fit words into beats and bars, and knowing how to make it flow and sound actually okay. Because there's a parody song, and then there's somebody who just tries to jam 100 words into one verse, and it just, you know, it just doesn't work. So it doesn't, or maybe it works, but it just doesn't sound as good as if you're actually putting the right amount of beats and words together, and you're rhyming, and you can form a cadence, and you can almost shape a song, I guess. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it is awesome.
I've got to keep an eye out for those raps, rap of the week.
Yeah, I'll flick one through to you.
Do you keep like a reel of them?
I
want to be all over them.
Yeah. I've got a couple at work. I'll see if I can fling one in your direction.
Do. See if we can like fade one in the podcast like to finish with or something.
Cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, we're pretty much that's almost our time. Hey, do you have anything else that you wanted to ask Adam, Pete?
No, I think we've covered pretty much everything that I had written, to be fair, but in a good way. Actually.
Yeah. I was keen to just let you talk about things that maybe you don't often get the opportunity to talk about. I was keen to not bring up the whole hunk of the 2019 hunk of the year.
You win one New Zealand's hottest media hunk, and all of a sudden, they haven't run that again since then. So I am the reigning champ, but we may as well get that in there.
Retiring.
When you Google Adam Green, that is the first thing that pops up.
Well,
topless, I'm pretty sure.
That is if there's one thing that is my one true claim to fame from being in the radio industry all these years, it is if you Google who is New Zealand's hottest media hunk, the first answer that comes up is still 3 years later Adam Green. So
brilliant.
I've got that going for me at least for the next year or two.
Yeah, man. And your parody game's quite strong, because I saw something also recently where you did like a perfume parody. Of the TV ad, but it was like a Rexona thing. Yeah, that's cool. It's actually quite hard to mock someone. Well, we're talking before about people being critical of you, and you obviously don't take yourself too seriously as well. You do and you don't. I think you're pretty happy to laugh with your job. Yeah,
and you can't, I guess.
Something that makes you a bit of a hard target as well. You can't help but like someone who's like that.
Yeah, totally.
Oh, thanks. I'd like to hope so. You can't take yourself too seriously. There's been people both here in New Zealand and around the world. You can see a change in people, I guess, when they get an ego or they start to really seriously believe their own opinions to the point that they think that theirs is the only way that's right. And when you're in a public forum and you're speaking to the general public, it's just you just come across a bit of an asshole sometimes when you get like that. And some people like that, some people might 100% agree with your opinion, but I don't want to come across as an asshole. I don't think I'm an asshole. So,
No.
Yeah.
Totally. We do our best here as well.
It just seeps through the cracks sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes. But speaking of... Actually, that doesn't make sense at all. That was a bad segue. That's a real bad segue. Speaking of, no, irrelevant. It's time for tasting notes.
Oh, lovely.
So we've got something poured here, which is, I gave Adam a message and said, what would you like to sample for our regular tasting notes? No problem at all. And this is something that I've had my eye on for a little while. This Good George brewery, which is whereabouts are they?
It's in Hamilton.
Frankton,
Hamilton. Yeah.
Beautiful place.
It is industrial and beautiful. Yeah.
Stunning. Absolutely stunning.
Right down from the cricket oval.
You can really just taste the serenity, I reckon, with this one. I don't know if you've heard many of our reviews before, Adam, but we definitely we like to make up a bit of the terminology.
Marmite, I think, cropped up there.
Yeah. Marmite.
Yeah.
What are you getting from this particular Good George Pilsner?
Let's go for the aroma to start with. What are we feeling in the...
Now I can only think of Marmite.
Apricot?
So can I. And you know what? I think this is a little Marmite-y. Now that you've said Marmite-y, I'm feeling a Marmite-y aftertaste. Thanks.
What would you pair it with?
Marmite toast.
Yeah, Marmite toast.
Yeah.
Crispy Vogels. Cheese.
Yeah.
A hearty relish.
Actually,
I think this is a beer that... If you're a craft beer lover, sometimes you get, and I do like a craft beer. I like a big range of beers, but if you're a craft beer lover, sometimes you'll find something that's extra punchy and hoppy and, has this massive aroma when you put it up to your face and you think this is going to be amazing, and you show your mate or your wife or whoever it might be, you're like, have a taste of this beer. And they're a regular old lager drinker, and they're just like, what the hell have you served me?
Yeah.
I think this is a mid-ranger where you could perhaps slide it under the nose of somebody who is a lager drinker and they wouldn't be offended.
Totally.
But it does have enough there that if you are a craft beer drinker, you get a bit of that too.
Yeah. It's got some fruity notes, and it's got some character as opposed to just a up and down lager.
Totally.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Apricots and kiwi fruit.
Apricots and kiwi fruit. I'm getting a little bit of fruit as well, mostly Marmite. But
Mango.
But yeah. One thing I would say, the first con ever from an alcohol review that we've done, drum roll, it was very hard to open the bottle.
There was struggles.
Weak wrists.
Very weak.
You're a drummer. Those things should be absolutely
the
pumping.
Touch Adam, with the stick, you see. So he's lost it. He's lost the grip factor.
Right.
He's not a monkey.
It's actually a gigantic bottle, but the neck of the bottle is tiny, and that's where my plan fell apart, because I've got these sausage fingers and I couldn't actually fit my hand because of the shoulder of the bottle, you're going to have to buy a bottle, folks, and try it for yourselves.
Effectively like getting 5 sticks of luncheon and trying to
Just jamming them in there. Just find your daintiest friend with the strongest fingers, and this is the bottle for them.
Yeah. Yeah, basically. But apart from that, lovely
It's
drop.
a beautiful drop, yeah. It's very, very nice. It's quite refreshing. I can see like a nice hot summer's day. It's, sitting by the pool.
Yeah.
You totally have it with this.
It's a good summer's drop. Yeah, might have to stock up because it's starting to warm up finally. Awesome. Okay, well, maybe we should call it there.
Yeah, I think so.
Thank you so much for coming
Thank you
on
so much,
board.
Adam. That
No,
was really
thank
good.
you very much, guys.
Incredibly
I
fun.
appreciate it. It's been an absolute pleasure. So thank you for having me on.
Nice to have you here. Very first guest. Hopefully,
A decade.
Yeah.
Of podcasts.
Congratulations.
Oh, thank you very much.
10. That's a
why we don't have
milestone.
party
We never thought we'd get this far.
Yeah.
Perhaps we can do it again the same time next year.
Yeah.
And get you back again.
Yeah,
and
see what's changed.
I'd love
between
to.
now
how
and
far
then.
things have happened. Yeah.
We'll still be playing Bad Liar. So,
Yeah. But we should really finish off with a bit of Bad Liar.
Oh,
that would be
yeah.
a nice way to sort of segue out.
I think that'd be amazing.
Yeah.
Here we go. Okay, thank you so much, folks.
Thanks, team.
Thanks for listening. Thanks, Adam. Thanks, Pete. We'll catch you guys next time.
Tearing at the seams, wish I could escape. I don't wanna be